Okay, well, we'd done our initial training, of course, and we'd also done training up in Scotland for getting ready for D-Day. Everyone knew it was going to happen. We didn't know when or where, but we did a training up there for 6 months, and then we came down to Portsmouth, and I'd been on this landing craft. I joined it up at Invergordon, so I'd done this 6 months up there with them, and now I was coming on home territory. I knew the south coast fairly well now, and so we put in at Portsmouth. We came through the Dover Straits, and we had not seen anything of the enemy at all up in Scotland. Not an enemy aircraft, very, very rarely a British aircraft. And now we're coming down, we're getting into waters that are well known to us, and we just entered the Straits of Dover, and we heard a firing noise, something firing, swung round, and there was an E-boat, and it come in behind us, and a very, very fast boat, capable of 48 knots, and it came sweeping past us, manoeuvring the guns, two of which are similar to the ones that we had aboard, and they were raking this little convoy of 6 vessels as they came by. By the time we brought the guns to bear, they were nearly out of sight. We did send a few rounds after them, but it was too late anyway. But now we realised we were in dangerous waters instead of where we'd been. I hadn't seen a rocket ship close to before. I now saw them, and not only that, we were actually going on them to load 5 pound rockets onto their firing equipment, which were the whole of their upper deck were covered in these. I would call it angle iron. It was like a chute, and they were done in banks, and these banks of rockets could be fired off in one salvo, which would take a few seconds, because I think there was 1,050 rockets in one charge, and they could be fired, and the whole lot could go off in one charge, or they can be split up in groups, and one bay fire, and then another bay fire, and little breaks in between them. And anybody who's never been near a rocket ship when it's firing, I hadn't and still hadn't at this stage, but it's quite a frightening experience. And so now we were aboard some of these rocket ships, loading a rocket missile into each of these things that would fire them. When we went in on D-Day morning, we had a set pattern of landing, and we had 35 LCAs in between two LCFs. I was on the port LCF. There was our opposite number, LCF 42, on the starboard side, and before them was LCGs bombarding the shore as we were working our way towards it. And behind us was I was on Sword Beach. We had got 5 rocket ships immediately behind us, and on the Canadian beachhead, they'd only got 2 rocket ships, and Gold had only got 2 rocket ships. Why we got 5, I don't know, but we had. just getting back to the rockets, I was speaking to one of the Navy men who was in the crew, and I said, "What's it like when you're firing these rockets? Uh, what do you notice about it as apart from the noise?" He said, "Well, this upper deck that we're standing on whilst we're talking, and where all the rockets are stabled on ready for firing," he said, "when you're below decks, that deckhead glows red hot. When you fire a salvo, whichever part of the ship it's fired from on the upper deck, that part of the deckhead up, as you're looking up from below, it's glowing red hot." Trout line didn't exist before the night of D-Day, the 6th of June, and we didn't know what we would be doing from there on after D-Day. So we quickly learned in the evening of D-Day, we were ordered to move up back along the coast from where we'd actually started early that morning, virtually in the same spot where we went ashore with the first wave. And that were being explained to through a loudspeaker was the beginning of this defensive line, which was going to be known from then on as the Trout Line. It consists, the people on the Trout Line, the vessels, were LCS, LCGs and LCSs, and they were all part of the eastern flank, and that would be their job every night. They would have to go off roughly at the same time. They had to get there just after dark and take up position. When they reached the position, they dropped anchor and it became a static line. You couldn't be moving while you were firing because that would upset the whole apple cart, so you had to be at anchor. But on the inside of our line was another smaller line, and it was made up of MTBs, that's motor torpedo boats. They were very fast. They were capable of 45 knots, not quite as much as the German E-boat, which was 48 knots, but they could still go off at a very, very fast speed. Now, they didn't ride at anchor like we did on the Trout Line. They were moving about slowly all the time, up and down, in a very low gear, but their engines were running. And the reason was, if anything got through the Trout Line, the enemy, they would immediately know, and they would chase it down, hunt it down, and deal with it. And believe me, the way they moved, they would soon catch up with anything that was moving. So yes, these weasels were purpose-built. They didn't carry a crew. There was just one among each group with 2 men on, 2 frogmen, and they moved about. Once the E-boats had towed them out to where they would be starting from, these frogmen would then go around all these pilotless carriers, and they would set the radio signal on so that it was set on its course. And once that had been set, there was no changing it. It went through to whatever it was going to target. And that's what we were there to stop. There were also human torpedoes, which carried a just a pilot in it. He sat in a, it was actually two torpedo tubes turned into a vessel. One was acting as the ship, if you like to call it, but only one single person could sit in it, and it had a perspex dome over the top of it, and attached to it was metalwork crisscrossed, and on it was a torpedo tube with a live torpedo in it. So that was where that would be launched from, and it would run on the surface to its target. And there was, as I say, just 2 men to each 8 of these things. Once they'd swum round them all, put them on course, they then swam back and went aboard the E-boat. And then there was the midget submarine, which had a crew mainly of 2. Sometimes they were on their own, but mainly there were 2 on those, and they were similar to the human torpedo. They set themselves the course where they needed to be, and then when they were ready, they surfaced and let their missile go. So if these things out on the trout line got through, it would be havoc, because they would immediately be heading straight and in fairly fast vessels as well. They'd be heading straight for the anchorage, get in among them, and they'd do all sorts of damage. So in the daytime we were always close by the anchorages, so that if there was any air attacks we could deal with those, particularly our vessel if it was low flying aircraft, which often there were when they were attacking that, and then surface craft like E-boats and anything else that could get through. And that happened from the evening of June the 6th until the 11th of September. And every night we were at action stations. Before we even reached, we went at action stations when we left the anchorage area, and that continued right throughout the night until we came back the next morning. This is Boston War Memorial, which was the land that it stands on was given by a member of the public in Boston, a rich man who owned it, because it's in the town centre virtually, and he gave it to the people of Boston because they were growing all over the country. Remembrance gardens were shooting up everywhere. Every town and every city that hadn't got one were now getting them after the First World War. Some of us who'd been in the Second World War, as we were now getting older, we were forming associations recognising the regiments that served in, or what branch of the forces that served in, and anything that could be sort of put forward as a worthy of a remembrance plaque or whatever. I myself, I was the chairman of the Normandy Veterans Association, and also chairman of the Boston and District ex-service joint committee. So we've got plenty of committee members, and all we needed was some volunteers to come and help raise some of this money, which they did do. They collected in supermarkets and stuff like that, like they used to do with the poppies and stuff. And the general public were very, 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 very kind to us, and they bent over backwards to help raise money for us. And we're very proud of what we've done, because it's there now. hopefully somebody's going to keep it going, you know, making sure that it stays clean and tidy over the years as they pass, because we're all getting a bit ancient now. And I hope that some of the younger people who are probably serving in the forces at this moment, when they come out, if they join up with their respective units, they'll probably become members of the British Legion and local ex-service organisations. And if they do, good luck to them, and I hope they do continue to do this kind of thing.